Manana Sizuas. Welcome back, colleagues. Imina 37 na lihaso turn Guahan is called to order. If there's no objection, I would like to grant privilege of the floor to former Senator Simon Sanchez. Thank you. Madam Majority Leader, you're recognized.
Sidus Masi, Madam Speaker, Hafaday colleagues. Notwithstanding the House rules, I move to adopt today's legislative session agenda dated March 6, 2024.
On the motion to adopt the agenda, is there any objection? Seeing no objection, motion carries. Majority Leader, you are recognized.
Sidus Masi, Madam Speaker, I move to waive legislative session agenda items 2 through 6, that is the prayer, recognition of recipient of Imiladzen Mestakiluna Sacrificio, reciting of the Inafresi, singing of the Guam hymn, and singing of the national anthem.
Are there any objections to that motion to waive those items? Seeing no objection, motion carries. We're now on roll call. Clerks, please take the roll call.
Senator Barnett, Senator Blas, Senator Brown, Senator Duenas, Senator Fisher, Senator Lujan, Vice Speaker Munya Barnes, Senator Parkinson, Senator Perez, Senator Kanata, Senator San Agustin, Senator Siniclis, Senator Shelton, Senator Taitigui, Speaker Terlahi. Madam Speaker, there is a quorum.
Sizus Masi. Clerk. Majority Leader, Senator Shelton, you are recognized.
Sidus Masi, Madam Speaker, notwithstanding the House rules, I move to waive legislative session agenda items 8 through 12, call for approval of the Legislative Journal, communications and petitions, messages from Imagahagan Guahan, reports of standing committees, and reports of select committees.
On that motion to waive items 8 through 12 on our agenda, is there any objection? Seeing no objection, motion carries. Majority Leader, you are recognized.
Sidus Masi, Madam Speaker, I move that bills introduced, bill numbers 249-37 COR, 250-37 LS, through 252-37 LS and 253-37 COR, through 258-37 COR, and resolutions introduced, resolution numbers 323-37 COR, 324-37 LS, through 327-37 LS, and 328-37 COR, through 340-37 COR be deemed to have been given their first reading.
On that motion on the first reading and bills and resolution, is there any objection? Seeing no objection, motion carries. We're now in motions. Are there any motions?
Yes.
Majority Leader, you are recognized.
Sidus Masi, Madam Speaker, I move to excuse senators not present for today's session.
Is there any objection to that motion? Seeing no objection, motion carries. Senator Parkinson, you are recognized under motions.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. At this time, I would like to make a motion to add Bill number 206-37 LS as amended by the Committee on Environment, Revenue and Taxation, Labor Procurement, Statistics and Research and Planning, introduced by myself, William A. Parkinson, an act to add a new Section 8113.16 to Article 1 of Chapter 8, Title 12 Guam Code Annotated, relative to providing temporary emergency power capacity to the third reading, and I would like to discuss at this time.
That is as amended by the committee.
As amended.
All right, so the motion would be to add it to the session agenda?
Yes,
first. All right, so on that motion to add Bill number 206-37 LS as amended by the committee onto our session agenda today, is there any objection? Seeing no objection, motion carries. Are there any other motions? Senator, Majority Leader, you are recognized.
Yes, Madam Speaker, Sidus Masi, I move that all resolutions, commendatory, congratulatory, and condolence resolutions introduced today and for the remainder of the session automatically include all senators as co-sponsors.
On that motion, is there any objection? No objection. Seeing no objection, motion carries. All right, Majority Leader, you're recognized. We're now on legislative concurrence.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Notwithstanding the House rules, I will move to waive legislative session agenda item 15, legislative concurrence, and 16, consent calendar.
On that motion to waive those items, is there any objection? Seeing no objection, motion carries. We're now on second reading. So the only bill on second reading right now is Bill number 206-37 LS. Senator Parkinson, you are recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. At this time, I would like to make a motion to add Bill number 206-37 as amended by the Committee on Environment, Revenue and Taxation, Labor, Procurement, Statistics, Research and Planning, introduced by myself, William A. Parkinson, and add to Act a new Section 8113.16 to Article 1 of Chapter 8, Title 12, Guam Code Annotated, relative to providing temporary emergency power capacity to the third reading, and I would like to discuss at this time.
Please proceed.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Today, we are introducing a bill to provide temporary power generation for the hot months in the summer so that we can avoid load shedding. That's why this bill is being discussed and introduced today. This bill is not my work. This bill was put to me at the request of GPA because they thought that this was their last resort to preventing load shedding in the summer. They introduced two bills to us, not just this one, 201 and 206. 201 did not pass this body because they have not made the proof positive case to this body of the fundamental question, have we exhausted all of our options? Now some time has gone by. This bill was introduced in November. We're here in February now, and I believe the calculus to that has changed. I believe they have exhausted all of their options, and as we've gone through the public hearing process and the talks in the community, I hope that they were able to make that case to my colleagues as well. See, I come from an emergency services background, and I was always taught that in an emergency, we solve the emergency first, and then in the final analysis, we do an after-action report and we see what happens. We have heard some feedback from the community that maybe we're moving too fast on this, maybe we could slow down and analyze different solutions. But again, I want to reiterate, we introduced this in November, and we have had plenty of time then to explore alternative solutions. And I fear even now we might be a little bit too late to hit some of the deadlines we hit. But that being said, we still march forward and we should still get this done. I believe GPA is acting in good faith, and I do believe they have exhausted all of their options, and that's why they are asking us for this awesome waiver of the procurement laws. Recently, I met a lot of the engineers in this very Congress building, presented them with certificates recognizing their good work. And, you know, as a man growing up, I must admit that I kind of grew up a little cynical. But strangely, my time in office has not made me more cynical, but less. When I met these engineers and these people who are literally working to keep the lights on, it brings my heart levity to see that there are people working in our government who are truly here trying to do good for their community, by their community. Because you see, the work to make this society work doesn't just happen on legislative days or elections or State of the Island addresses. It's a day in, day out job where people pound on doors that refuse to open, and then they put in the hard work to make those doors open. I looked into these people's eyes, and I looked into their hearts. And I don't think they have ill intent for the island or they're trying to pull a fast one on us. I think they see the same slow-moving emergency that I see, and that they've been trying to show us that if we don't get our ducks in a row in a certain amount of time, we are not going to get these projects up in time to prevent load shedding. So, I asked my colleagues to join me in this gesture of working with GPA in good faith to literally keep the lights on for us. I asked my colleagues to open the door for GPA to do their jobs so we can help them help us keep the lights on. And with that, Madam Chair, I would like to introduce a amendment. It is currently in the drive right now. It changes the window for approval of Attorney General approval from contracts to 48 hours to 5 calendar days. Then if the AG withdraws from representing GPA or refuses to provide legal services during the procurement of temporary power, it allows GPA to continue procurement without assistance or approval from the AG. And I guess I'd like to discuss that as well.
Yes, you may proceed. Does everyone have a copy? You may proceed.
Well, when I was going through my 2024 bingo card, I did not have the Attorney General refusing to do his duty regarding line agencies. And so this amendment is in reflection of the very unusual circumstances we find ourselves in. So I am putting forth this amendment as an idea before the general body. I hope my colleagues will support it, but I am looking at ways to make this work. So I am open and willing to work with any and all amendments to the amendment or this bill to make sure it's right and that we do right by the people of Guam. So with that, Madam Chair, I yield the rest of my time and look forward to the rest of the conversation.
On the amendment, would anyone like to be recognized on the amendment? Senator Paris, you're recognized on the amendment.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and good morning to my colleagues. So just a question for the author of the amendment. With the notwithstanding clause, if you were to remove it, will it be able to operate in the same way? And just keep the 5 calendar days?
Would the sponsor yield to that question?
I mean, if we were to do that, we would be opening ourselves up to having to have this conversation again in a few days, because I believe in our statutes there is penalties if, not penalties, but there are actions we can do if the Attorney General were to make a decision that we could appeal. You know, there are actions we could take, and there are actions we can take if the Attorney General rules incorrectly. However, there is nothing in our statutes to remedy what will we do if the Attorney General sits there and does nothing. There is no remedy in law for us to move forward if he just decides to sit on his work. And so, while I share your ambivalence at waiving the role of the Attorney General, this is, for the people watching at home, this is not normal in the political sphere. This is an extraordinary event where one person in an elected office isn't holding up the entirety of government. We're not just talking big projects, we're talking small projects too. Food for the elders, contract and maintenance contract for projects big and small. This is everything. And so while we can amend the amendment to take that language out, I fear in doing so, we are just setting ourselves up for coming back here again if we find that the Attorney General decides to just sit on his work. Because there is no legal remedy for us to exercise if he just sits on it. And so here we are. I hope that answers your question, ma'am.
I guess maybe if I can rephrase the question. So if you didn't have that notwithstanding clause and you just, basically you would just have the 5 calendar days. So it would state that the Attorney General's approval as to the contract's form and legality must be completed within 5 calendar days of receipt of the procurement package from GPA, and GPA is hereby authorized to proceed with the emergency procurement subject to the approval of the Guam Public Utilities Commission. So in effect, it's some way it's duplicating that. This, without that notwithstanding clause, it does allow for GPA to move forward. So I guess that's my, I guess that was my question. The other thing is if you keep the notwithstanding clause, I believe it doesn't state it just says GPA can approve it. So was that the intent for the agency? I was just wondering if, the board or perhaps, generally some sort of board approval or governing board might be included in this.
Yes, I do yield to that question, ma'am. Yes, ma'am, absolutely the intent of this is to work around the Attorney General. Let's be perfectly clear about this. This mechanism is in place because if the Attorney General were to just sit on the bill, there is nothing we can do. And so, you're correct. If the Attorney General does his duty and plays ball, we could take that part out and GPA will be perfectly able to function. However, if the Attorney General sits on the bill and does nothing, we have no recourse except through legislation. And so I would caution against making that amendment because otherwise it would just bring us back in here. But I am, like I said, I'm open and willing to all suggestions to get this right, but let's make the suggestions that don't just lead us back up here in a week.
Senator Parrish, you have the floor.
I don't think it fully satisfied my question, but I would probably talk to legal. Thank you.
All right, on the amendment, Senator Taitsky, you're recognized on the amendment.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and good morning as well to my colleagues. And Biba Mes Chamorro. Yeah. It's probably the nicest thing I'm probably going to say moving forward after that, because a day. For any senator standing up here making comments that the Attorney General is sitting and doing absolutely nothing is deceiving the public. Let's make it clear, the reason why the Attorney General is holding off is because he's been ridiculed for conflict of interest, and that his attorneys, as well as himself, may be barred because of it, because it's sitting in court right now to be decided by a judge whether there's a conflict of interest. So let's get this straight. This Attorney General is definitely not sitting on anything at all. Look at the billboards out there. Look at the crime that's been happening and how many he's been prosecuting and getting convicted. No wonder the people of Guam has lost the trust in this body, because the comments that are being made are false and deceiving. Be honest. Tell the people everything. Don't just give one side of the story to the people of Guam. Give both sides. Not everybody had the opportunity to read the letter from the Attorney General explaining why he has to hold off on everything. Basically, he could lose his license as well as his employees. You think that is not worth holding off? That's why we're here today. It's not just this bill. It's to discuss how we can get the attorney to move forward without the threat of being disbarred for himself and his attorneys. So let's get this straight before we move forward. This Attorney General sitting, doing nothing. Have you read the paper? That's ridiculous. And taking the Attorney General out right now from anything? Oh, here comes corruption. Unusual? You say this is very unusual? No, it's not unusual when somebody finally stands up to the corruption that's going on in this government. It's not unusual for people to strike back. And that's exactly what's happening. Making excuses because they're being questioned on some shenanigan that's going on. The Attorney General is put into place because we don't want the fox to oversee the hen house, do we? This body is sitting here and saying, okay, let's just wave everything under the sky to let GPA do what they want. Has anybody ever questioned the fact that GPA is actually using government funds, the people's money, to lobby for this company that won the bid? Using money from GPA for their ad agency to put things online? That sounds like a procurement issue to me. But no, this body wants to pull everybody away so that they can continue to go and do what they want. The fox watching the hen house. And this body doing it without any crossing your T's and dotting your I's. Just give it to them because they're threatening us again. How many times has GPA threatened us that they would not raise rates and we had to do what they wanted, and next thing you know, they still raise the rates? Are we all being blind here? Now you take this amendment. And this amendment basically gives them carte blanche, people. In case the Attorney General is sitting on it. Well, let's fix that first. Let's make sure we have legislation to allow him not to have a conflict of interest, to allow him what this body has done when it created the Attorney General's office. So there's no question. Because I tell you what, he's not going to sit and do nothing. He will address this, blaming everybody. But this body needs to stop. We need to get the people's trust again, my colleagues. We need to win their trust. That we are watching every government agency, especially in procurement. Look what happened to DOE. We watched what's happening to DOE. DOE is being in question. In fact, the letter that the Attorney General gave to every single one of us, there were over 20 agencies in question for some shenanigans going on, and now everybody's up in arms. We need to place caution. We need to remember who we work for. Who we work for, people. This amendment is just adding another fox to the henhouse. I object to this amendment. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Brown on the amendment.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. You know, I have to concur with the statements that are made by Senator Tello. And, you know, I appreciate the efforts of GPA coming to talk to us. And I have to tell you, this was not part of the discussion that I would agree to as the removal of the Attorney General. You know, our Attorney General has his own style, and so be it, as we all do. I mean, he was elected by the people of Guam. But in order to move this issue forward for the Guam Power Authority, the alternative is that, well, he's got 5 days to do it with this amendment, and if he doesn't do it, well, we're just going to bypass him and we're going to move forward, and the heck with that. You know, I'm sure our public, when they read the paper and they hear the news, you know, once again, I mean, look at recent days, this issue, again, even though we've known about it in oversight hearings with the Guam Memorial Hospital, the issue with the patient information system. Well, $5 million, I guess that's just what? What do we do with that? Whose head's going to roll for that? I don't hear any accountability with regards to misspending, not of just a few dollars, but millions of dollars in this government. Then we hear about the acquisition of the computers for the Department of Education, the largest department in the government of Guam. And now there are concerns about that particular procurement. And millions and millions and millions of dollars, $20+ million of people's money, was it properly spent? Did it go through the proper process? Or, you know, did we select our favorite vendor? Which happens in government a lot more frequently than we would like to think. And now in this particular case, I mean, you kind of understand and empathize with the Guam Power Authority about their need to certainly want to facilitate this process and avoid another protest. Because of course there's some companies out there that will protest if they don't get the deal. They have a reputation for it. They're known for not procuring or making sure the government can't procure if they're not procuring their particular company or their particular service. But you know, if our job here is to simply respond to the emergency once again and remove an elected official from reviewing and doing their due diligence and ensuring the check and balance in this government, well, I don't think we're doing the right thing. Now we're not talking about the Guam Power Authority moving forward to get their needed support base to ensure that we don't have load shedding between now and the completion of the new Ukadu power plant. I mean, if that's the case, then why don't we remove the governor, who's an elected official, because she doesn't agree, as the majority members of this body did, on where to locate the new hospital? What do you think about that? Well, I'm sure the governor's going to go, what the heck are you guys talking about? But, oh, it's a little different because we're talking about the Attorney General of Guam, right? Because some of us, maybe we don't like the Attorney General of Guam, we don't like his style, we don't like how he goes about doing his job. Well, that decision is for the people of Guam to decide. But he's ruffling a lot of feathers, and I'm glad he's ruffling feathers, because boy, there are feathers out here in the government of Guam that need to be ruffled. The amount of corruption that is happening in this government is just, we should be disgusted about that. We should be wanting to ensure the government officials at all levels are properly executing their job and ensuring that the purse of the people is being properly spent. But when we step out to do something a little different from the process, when we're here once again for another, you know, how many emergency sessions do we have? We should just throw them in between every regular. Why don't we just never get out of session? Because once again, we're being asked to do something to the exception of the process again. Regardless of whatever the reason is that brought us to why we're here today, we're once again being asked to change the process. And now we're being asked by passing this amendment to remove the Attorney General of Guam, who's been elected by the people of Guam to perform his job. And are we, whenever we think it's convenient for us or when we think another elected official is an obstacle, well, we're going to give them a time limit and then we're going to tell them if you don't do it in this time frame, well, we're just going to remove you from the process. At a time in this government when, wow, you know, I know the governor didn't touch almost at all on it last night. Day after day, we continue to hear about the misuse and abuse in the government of Guam. Now this is a discussion. I'm not happy that we're here having to deal with another exception, regardless, Typhoon Mawar, whatever it is that led us to be here today to have to respond on a matter for the Guam Power Authority. Because many years ago, when we were involved in creating the CCU, we had hoped that most of these issues would be addressed by the elected officials that sit on the board of the CCU. But here we are once again. And even I, who have been very supportive of Guam Power Authority, I was their oversight chair once upon a time. But even I have to say, well, we're seeing you a little more than we'd like to. But here we are. But if the response to facilitating, assisting the Guam Power Authorities to remove the Attorney General of Guam from the review process of this contract, yes, I concur with Senator Tello. I have a problem with that. I think we should all have a problem with that. Simply because we have the ability to do it. Should we do it? Because we have the power to do it? Do we have the power to abuse that authority? We don't have enough checks and balances in government now. We've had many, many, many years where the Attorney General's office did not address proper investigations and review of this government activities. We've had years of where the government division didn't even exist for corruption in this government. And we've got government officials that have been cruising along because, oh my goodness, who's going to catch up with me? So do I think this amendment's in the best interest of the public? No. Am I willing to sacrifice it to expedite for the Guam Power Authority today? The answer's absolutely no. And that's the answer I gave to the officials from the Guam Power Authority on Friday. I would not support removing the Attorney General at all. I think this goes to an extent that's just totally unacceptable. And any colleague that votes for this, when things go wrong, are you going to stand up and take credit for it and take responsibility? GPA had a most recent ad in the paper for sole source procurement. That particular announcement doesn't even meet the requirements of the law. And that's just a sole source announcement in the paper. GPA needs to look at that. So colleagues, think very carefully. This additional language here to remove the Attorney General, one thing, we're giving him a time limit. The other thing is we're saying, oh, well, if you don't agree, Attorney General Moylan, we're just going to totally remove you from the table. Think twice, think several times, because removing an elected official from their position, really think about that. Because that's not what we're here to do. That's not what we should be here. I don't think the people of Guam elected us to do that when they elected the Attorney General of Guam. Perfect, imperfect, warts and all, however you may want to look at it. The Attorney General's office has a role. And you know, more power to him, more power to the current Attorney General. Like what you're doing, what he's doing or not, he's doing something out there. And he's responding to a need in this community because the crime and harm that's coming to our people has not dissipated. It's not disappeared. We're not living in a wonderful, tranquil, tropical environment. Look at the crime. Think about that the next time you go into a restaurant. Think about that the next time you get out of your car at night. Think about that the next time you go home if it's safe. Think about that the next time your family's out at night and you don't know where they're at. Are they safe in this community? But no, nay, we just want to, oh, look, we did it for GPA, rah, rah. And the hell with the people at the end of the day. Because look at us, we saved the day. Thank you, GPA, look at us. But are we doing the right thing? Are we doing the responsible thing? Did we even ask the Attorney General what his concern was with this? How do we know he's not going to address it? Because GPA and the Attorney General of Guam don't get along? Did we ask? Did we call him up? And I know, colleagues, be very, very, very careful. Because if you just so easily can remove an elected official from his responsibilities and his legal duties, well, think about that. Maybe that's going to happen to you as well. So I stand in objection, Madam Speaker, to this amendment.
Thank you, Senator Brown. On the amendment, Senator Dueñas, you're recognized on the amendment.
Jesus Masi, Madam Speaker. Good morning, and I join my colleagues in saying Viva Mes Chamorro. It's been an exciting evening, and it's going to be an exciting day today. A lot has been said, but Madam Speaker, I rise to maybe put an offer forward, as you and I had been discussing prior to entertaining this bill. And that is that I have another bill, actually, that I've introduced that my good friend Senator Joe will be entertaining soon, that has in the title, The Cart Before the Horse. And I think that that is appropriate in this situation, because between the governor's discussion last night and this section of the bill as an amendment that's being introduced, we may be arguing over something that actually has a solution. I've taken the time to read the Attorney General's letter penned March 5th, 2024, and delivered to the legislature at 3:35 on March 5, 2024. And in my simple reading of the Attorney General's proposal, it states very clearly why the conflict exists. And I don't want to get over my skis, because I know that we have an invitation for the Attorney General to come before us and make that presentation. But I believe if we answer this question, it may even be prudent for us to have the committee introduce this legislation while we're in this emergency session, because as the governor stated last night, and we'll hear from the Attorney General, and as we're contemplating, we're not talking about the merits of this bill yet. We've talked a little bit about it with regard to the amendment. But it seems to me, since we're not in the committee of the whole, I think it would be prudent for us, if the author and the body would so be compelled, to set aside this amendment and set aside the bill and entertain the Attorney General so that we can clear up this point. I also did take the time to sit with GPA officials, as well as a member of the CCU, and go over everything that exists, which has prompted this emergency legislation. I'm looking forward to debating the merits of that. But I also did not agree with the elimination of the Attorney General. Originally, this bill contemplated 48 hours. I thought any type of timeline, given the current climate and what situations exist, would be problematic. There was some talk about the possibility of the 5 days. I actually will say and admit that I said, you may want to do this, because that seems reasonable, given the circumstances. But now, given the circumstances of the way it's written and the letter that's before us, I really think this body will be operating much better to suspend discussion on this and bring in the Attorney General, because I'm sure you've read it as well, Madam Chair. The Attorney General seems to have a very straightforward, pragmatic solution to, first of all, describing the problem that exists and bifurcating this issue of his legal and fiduciary responsibility. I think if that solution comes forward, there is review, and I believe review has due process, whether this bill passes or not. Outside of that, Madam Speaker, and I know that you are an officer of the court, we have our legal counsel here, we've got others in this body that are officers of the court, esteemed jurist, and I don't even know how to, in my commentary, and I'm not trying to delve into, but it's related, I don't even know how to take the governor's presentation last night in terms of what's pending and requires review and will come to a halt. So if we have that explanation, because I think the public, and I know for sure our agencies and instrumentalities are under a great deal of duress right now. And I think these measures of talking about an emergency measure for GPA and knowing that it also has a compelling issue now with procurement, I don't know how to better make this case, Madam Chair, and I hope this motion will pass. Because I don't think we can even dispense of the motion on the amendment, or really even what would be the veracity of the bill if it should pass. Because I'm thinking right now, I don't know the appetite, but I don't know that this amendment would pass, and if it did, if it was in the bill, I don't know if it would poison it. If it's even going to pass at all either. So, Madam Chair, at this point, I make that motion. I think it's the responsible thing for this body to do. And I think we can get a clarification, and we might decide that the 13 or 14 lines that are in, that the Attorney General has represented as a bill to correct the error in the law as they see it, in the inability to move forward on criminal matters versus civil discussions within procurement and operations, do not hinder one another. And that the chief legal officer of the government of Guam wants final clarification on this, because I don't think he wants to stop all the action going forward. I think what he wants to do is make sure, my simple reading of his presentation to us, that he's not conflicted. So, Madam Speaker, I make a motion at this point. We suspend discussion on this amendment and on the bill and move to entertaining the Attorney General and the letter that he's penned to us and the presentation so that we may consider these things together. In closing, Madam Speaker, I also think that even in the event that we continue to debate this bill, if there is a concurrent solution that comes forward, this amendment may be moot. And we can deal with the motion as it stands, because it would mean that the Attorney General is still going to review this process, even though one or two of the entities that are discussed as having problems with investigations would prevent him possibly from going forward. I think that is such a compelling question, and I make that motion at this time, Madam Chair.
All right, we're going to take a 1-minute recess. We're back from recess. When we left off, Senator Duenas had made a motion. Senator Duenas, you're recognized.
Jesus Masi, Madam Speaker. After concurring with our colleagues, I think we have consensus. So I'd like to withdraw my original motion for the bill and the amendment to be set aside, and I'd like to make a new motion.
Please proceed. Is there any objection to withdrawing the motion? Seeing no objection, motion carries. Go ahead.
So, Madam Chair, at this time, the consensus I believe that the body has come to is that this amendment, which has a lot of implications, actually may be satisfied by the further discussion we're going to have later on with the Attorney General. But the general consensus of the body is they want to continue to debate this bill, the main motion. So I think we'll be suspending any amendments that are pending, but this one is the first one, and then you can move forward on debating the bill, and then move forward to see what we have to do in terms of settling the legal impasse. So at this time, I just motion to set aside this amendment and possibly other amendments and just debate the main motion that's been introduced and accepted, and then the body proceeds after that.
All right. If I could get the sponsor of the amendments, is there any objection? He's making a motion to set aside your amendment, or would you like to withdraw it? All right, so is there any objection to the motion to set aside that amendment? Seeing no objection, that amendment is set aside with the understanding that the senator can make that amendment later. Any objection? Seeing no objection, motion carries.
Madam Chair, I don't want to debate the amendments. Thank you for once again recognizing me again. I don't want to debate the merits of the amendment as because it probably may not come forward, or we'll see what happens with it. So at this time, I'm done speaking on the amendment, and maybe speak later on the main motion. Jesus Masi.
All right, Jesus Masi. All right, now we are back on the main motion, which is to move the bill to the third reading. So on the bill, is there anyone who'd like to speak? Senator Fisher, you are recognized.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. I heard some discussion on the floor earlier that there was reluctance or fear that the Attorney General's office was being cut out of the process for the procurement of this temporary emergency power capacity. I've read the bill, and I don't see that language in there, so I would like to put a question, or absence of language, I'd like to put a question to the author of the bill, the question being, sir, do you agree that the Attorney General does, in fact, have a role in this procurement, and that he merely has a time period during which he must act?
With the sponsor yield.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for that question. No, I do agree with you. This proposed legislation absolutely does not cut out the Attorney General from the process. It puts a timeline for the Attorney General to opine his opinion, and then after that timeline, when we were speaking of the amendment, allow us to move beyond him if for whatever reason he could not move forward on his opinion. And so, no, at no point did we try to cut out the Attorney General from the process. We just tried to find unique and creative workarounds to stop to prevent the business of the government from stopping.
Thank you, ma'am. If I may ask a follow-up. The follow-up question would be, does my friend agree that it is inaccurate to say that the Attorney General has no role?
Absolutely. It is absolutely inaccurate to say that the Attorney General has no role in this. That is just misinformation at best, falsehoods at worst. But no, the Attorney General is involved every step in the way, but because this is an emergency and we have the element of time working against us, there was a time component installed with the amendment as well.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. That answers my questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. On the bill, is there anyone else who'd like to be recognized on the bill?
On the main motion, Speaker Teresa Lai, you're recognized on the main motion.
Situs Masi. The bill has several components, and of course, I don't think anyone in here is objecting to the government of Guam or GPA procuring temporary emergency power capacity. And for all the reasons that they stated, I'm sorry, Madam Speaker, can we just take a second recess? Sorry, it keeps falling. All right. Yeah, so I don't believe anyone in this body or in Guam has any objection to GPA procuring temporary power capacity in an emergency fashion, based on what they've stated. I do have some concerns that I'd just like to put on the record. So what the bill does is not only allow, well, GPA is allowed to do its emergency procurement however it wishes, and without our need to be involved. The issue here in this bill is that GPA wants to extend what is normally a 90-day emergency procurement to 2 years, and they want it to be approved by the legislature so that there will be no challenges as to the duration of that emergency. So that I don't necessarily have any objection to extending from 90 days to 2 years for this particular procurement, that power, or I guess, that same exact contract. I want it to be limited, though, to that contract, not for any additional measures on top of that or any side contracts that come up because of this. And so, it may be technical, but I just want to ensure that it says that that with the consent of the PUC, GPA shall proceed with the emergency procurement for a vendor to provide and install and operate these 20 megawatts on a 2-year base contract. So for that contract, I will agree to extend that to 2 years. I do not want to extend GPA's emergency power in general from 90 days to 2 years for everything. The other issue that the bill raises is that they are asking for the legislature to remove the automatic stay if there is a protest in this procurement. Removing the stay means that everything stops and they don't build the temporary emergency power capacity. So I fully understand why GPA wants us to help them remove that stay, that automatic, hold on the construction of or the procurement of these services if there's a protest, because this is an emergency and we want to go forward no matter what. No matter what means even if there is a protest, meaning somebody is alleging that GPA is doing something wrong in this procurement. And I believe we have received letters yesterday that kind of raises that question for us. So it's a very real possibility that by waiving the stay now on any, if there's a protest, that we are really waiving potential remedies for those who may protest. So one one of the letters we received was from someone who did not bid on this process or in this procurement necessarily. However, he's raising the concern that the notice that GPA sends out is normally supposed to go to those who have participated in past procurements with GPA in similar matters. So there's a dispute whether, well, GPA didn't give this company notice, and the dispute seems to be that whether he was a participant in similar matters or not. Those types of issues normally are decided by the OPA, and they may very well be in this case as well. However, yeah, so us lifting the stay will really impact that particular company, and I don't know who else might have any other procurement protests, right, in regards to this. There was also an allegation that GPA should have known some of the things that they are claiming are emergency now. That again will be a matter for the OPA to decide, but we are being asked today as a legislature to kind of rule in favor of GPA and say, no matter what, go forward because of the stakes that we have. And this has been described to us by GPA as pretty much the only remedy to the lack of power capacity at this point. So that's another thing I want to put on the record, and maybe I'm going to ask the sponsor if he would yield. Is that a fair statement that GPA is telling us that this is the only remedy for temporary power capacity at this point?
I'm going to ask the author, would you like to yield, Senator Parkinson?
Yes, ma'am, I would like to yield. No, that is a very fair statement, and in fact, it is the number one question before this body. Has GPA exhausted all their remedies before we grant them this awesome power? For me, I believe they have, and that is the question we have to answer before the body today. Have they exhausted all their remedies? And because they have come to me and asked me for this, I think they have, Madam Chair.
All right, so
Speaker.
GPA's line is that because of the damage that happened to the typhoon and the setbacks in the new Ukadu power plant, they were counting on that to be completed at a certain time that will not be completed within that original time frame. So this is now their solution for temporary power. I do not believe that GPA has told us, because they told us the opposite in another hearing, that this is not necessarily the solution to load shedding. So I just want the public who's listening to be clear. Is that, maybe I'm going to ask the sponsor to chime in on that as well. Is that correct? Because GPA had told us in prior hearings that there is no solution to load shedding for the next 6 months. This will, of course, help in generating power, but will this mean, by us passing this bill, does that mean there will be no load shedding?
Senator Parkinson, would you like to yield to that question?
Yes, ma'am. This is a question I'd like to yield to. I think this is one that needs to be answered with a bit of nuance, because right now we currently have a math problem. We just aren't going to have enough generation for the summer if we do not pass this bill. And so, in that light, this is necessary to stop load shedding. Where the nuance comes in is, if we have any other problems between now and then, this bill might not solve load shedding because we have another problem that causes load shedding. So while this solves a current problem in front of us, there's no guarantee we won't have other problems that may cause us to be back in the same place tomorrow. Unfortunately, we were dealing with infrastructure that has frankly been here since Moses. And the only solution, the long-term solution, is we have to build a new power plant. And until then, we are putting duct tape over gunshot wounds, frankly.
It was thank you to the sponsor for yielding. It was my understanding that our load shedding problems were, they're different parts of the system that are in flux, and kind of a different reason for the load shedding every time it happens. But anyways, my biggest concern with the bill is similar to some of the previous speakers. It's a big thing for the legislature to waive this stay, because without a stay, if the OPA is able to put the procurement on hold, then the protesting vendor wins, then that means they might have to redo the procurement and the protesting vendor might get that contract. If we remove this possibility of a stay, then this contract's going to go forward no matter what, even if the OPA finds that there was something wrong in the process. The contract goes forward. Of course, any protester who wins his protest with the OPA is still not going to be able to get that contract, and the remedies that they will be able to get afterward, I think, remain to be seen. This is very important to us, I think, because we've seen recently the OPA just issued a decision, or I'm sorry, it was the court issuing a decision after 10 years of litigation over a protest between duty-free and the airport, and involving that LOTI contract and the vendor, the big vendor for the airport. 10 years. So it went through the procurement protest stage, it went through the court stage, and I believe it's been 10 years, and this is the power of us lifting a stay. So in that case, we can see the contract went forward, and the losing vendor will never get that contract back. It's or have an ability to bid on it. So it's just a matter. I just want to put those on the record because we have to take it very, very seriously. And while I heard some people and leaders say we should waive stays all the time, I completely disagree, because some of these protests have merit. In fact, it looks to me like the person who is a potential protester in this had merit in the most recent case before the OPA that was dismissed. Or, sorry, I take it back, it wasn't dismissed, it was GPA withdrew the whole project, canceled the project instead of addressing the protests. So I think these things are very real, and I do not want to condone GPA not following the procurement process. The PUC has promised they will look at it also and make sure that the procurement process is followed, but the PUC always looks at these things, and they still get to the OPA, and the OPA still is making findings that are, that not all of our agencies are complying with procurement law. We just heard about the DOE. We heard about the hospital, the major contract that the hospital procured for, I think it was collection services, or how to fix their collection systems and their billing systems. And there were several findings, I think totaling over $4 million that the OPA made. So these are significant. And the whole point of the procurement process is to bring value to the government of Guam. So if we could have got those services for a better value, in the GPMH case, if we actually had received the services that the OPA alleges had not been made, those types of things, that's why I'm very hesitant to waive the stays and to make special arrangements in these protest matters. This is, anyways, there's so many examples, but those are a couple, and I just want to caution my colleagues to take this very seriously. And I'm very concerned because of the letter that we received yesterday. GPA has made a response to it, but it's very similar to the case that I read from the OPA recently, where GPA did not agree with the OPA at all, never, all the way to the end. They said the OPA, they did not agree with them. And so, but that's how our system is set. So if OPA is supposed to have the last word, and if that's not good enough for them, then they go to the courts. And now we're seeing the courts have different rulings as well. So I'm just saying, some of these protests are legitimate. We want GPA to follow the rules. This is a contract that is already made. For me, that's even worse, that we're in the middle of a contract that they've already, well, they haven't signed a contract. They keep claiming, oh no, but really, they've already decided who's getting the award. And they just need to do the paperwork, and that's why we're here, to give them from, instead of 90 days to 2 years, and to say that the stay will be lifted. We heard the OPA testify on a bill for critical procurements, where one of my colleagues was lifting stays for critical procurement for federal funds that had sat too long and were at risk of being totally lost. And so for those contracts, the legislature was asked to lift the stays. And the OPA said, if we're going to do things like that, he wants us to do it up front, before the person is selected. And I think that's fair too. So anyways, I guess the point is that in this case, there are some very serious concerns, but we are weighing, this is what we're being forced to weigh, all of these concerns, potential, errors in the procurement process, unfairness, not good value, with this is our only solution for temporary power capacity today. This is the only solution that GPA is giving us. So I just want to put that on the floor. So just Mossy, Madam Speaker.
Buen provecho, Speaker Chalai. Senator Duenas, I'll recognize you on the main motion.
Sidus Mossy, Madam Speaker. Just have a few comments on this proposal, 20637. I concur with the comments of the retiring speaker. And it is extremely unfortunate that we are in this position. But as the previous speaker mentioned, I want to just do my due diligence as well in terms of full disclosure. In the meeting that I had with the GPA general manager and the chairman of the CCU, excuse me, a member, former chairman, former senator, I believe, who's had privilege of the floor today. I arrive at the conclusion that the retiring speaker made and the questions that she had for the author of the bill for two fundamental reasons. In the description of the only solution, and you can see the letter that's been placed on our desk in terms of the maintenance contract of the Agreco power supply that has been problematic, to say the least. But in this current procurement, what was described to me as the reason why this is not only the only solution, but the fastest solution, because there are other solutions. They're going to ration. They're going to figure out how to do that. That's going to be a very, very uncomfortable solution. They'll do what they got to do. They know how to manage the grid, but it's going to be painful. While there is no guarantee, my understanding in the presentation that I saw was that there would be almost immediately several other units to come back online to add up to perhaps around 12 megawatts with the current structure that exists. And with the added power, it would be another full 20 megawatts to come in to almost arrive at the 40 meg shortfall that they currently continues to plague our system due to the reasons that they've given us, typhoon related and others, not to mention the delay of Ukadu, but I'm sure their PR people are going to handle that. I'm painfully arriving at this decision because of that situation that exists. I also like the fact that what the retiring speaker said, and I concur. The OPA says, you're going to do something like this, do it in the full light of day. Put your arguments on the floor, explain to the people of Guam why you're doing something that hopefully never becomes the precedence, because it's not the way we should be operating, but that we do rise to the occasion as needed. But I you know, I think we all are going to concur whatever way this goes down, that this cannot and will not be accepted as a regular way of doing business. But the other thing, Madam Chair, as I said, and I'm looking forward to some of the other deliberations that we'll be doing in this body today, is really settling another issue, and that is, you know, we do have to answer once and for all the review process and what's going on with our Chief Legal Officer and everything else contained in all of these discussions. So, yes, the people of Guam are getting, once again, a front row seat at the sausage making factory. But that's our job. Hopefully next time it won't be Sarisus Pakpak that we're making, as my good friend Senator Barnett likes to remark a lot of times about our various funny Chamorro cultures that we enjoy so much, and it will actually be short ribs and barbecue manok and kelagwin, you know, doing things that we normally do and not and not do sausage only. So that is my comments, Madam Speaker. I wanted to let the people of Guam know that, you know, I took everything in during that meeting. I looked in the whites of their eyes and made sure that I asked every single question that I could, and arrived at the decision once again that they made, because this is a system that's in place that has more than likely failed because of, you know, not only the storm, but problematic issues with regard to the maintenance of these machines, but also the fact that the factory that has already done this procurement on Guam and has this equipment on Guam, they're not sitting there, you know, able to just put those 20 megs over in the corner and go, don't touch that, that's for Guam. You know, there is, from what we understand, you know, extreme competition worldwide for generation. And I would hope that, you know, we wouldn't end up without this procurement, because they've just said we can't wait for you anymore, Guam, and we'll try again maybe in the future. That's where we're at, from what I understand. And I want to put that on the record so that people are completely aware when I make a final decision after what amendments may pass or not pass in this bill, and what it looks like when it's packaged up and sent to the store. We'll see what that looks like. But I wanted to let the people of Guam know why I'm thinking the way I'm thinking, and how dreaded I feel, you know, that the summer months come. And like I said, there's no guarantee, but if we do roll into that scenario that we all are familiar with from time ago, it's going to be equally as rough. So with that, Madam Chair, I just wanted to share those thoughts. And like I said, I think we've had very good deliberation on the accountability of what we're trying to do here, may or may not do. And those are my comments on Bill 206-37. Susan Mossy, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Senator Duenas. Anybody else on the main motion? Anybody else on the main motion? Colleagues, we're going to take a moment's recess.
We're back from recess. Senator Parks, is there anyone else who'd like to speak on the bill? If not, then sponsor may close on the bill.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. At this time, I would like, before I continue on my closing, I would like to introduce an amendment to change, based on your testimony, Madam Speaker, to change it from 48 hours to 5 calendar days of receipt of the procurement package from GPA. That amendment is currently in the drive right now.
On the amendment, is there anyone who'd like to speak? You may close on the amendment.
Waive on close.
Is there any objection to this amendment? Seeing no, to the 5 days. Seeing no objection, amendment passes. Senator Parkinson, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'd also like to introduce an amendment based on your previous testimony to extend the limitation from 90 days of the emergency in 5 GCA 5215 to 2 years for this procurement only.
On that amendment, is there any, Senator Taitzkui, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. A question to the author of the amendment, to explain exactly what's the difference, on this 2 years and what does it really, see? On which procurement are you talking about? Is this something that, why 2 years instead of the 90 days change? If they can explain.
For the most part, it's because this emergency is going to be going on until we get the new Ukudu power plant up and running. And so this 2-year timeline is to reflect that emergency and to allow this legislation to be effective in addressing that concern until Ukudu power plant is built.
Thank you to the author of that amendment, but is this for just this particular generators and nothing else? No screws, bolts, or anything, or paperwork, or anything like that? Is this just specifically for these generators?
Yes, the way it's written, it's just for this procurement. Explicitly written on the amendment, just for this procurement.
Okay, I thank the author for answering my questions, and thank you, Madam Speaker, for the opportunity.
Thank you, Senator. On the amendment, is there anyone else who'd like to be recognized? If not, sponsor may close on the amendment.
So I heard the concerns of people regarding this bill, the fact that there's no guarantees, and that's true.
Sorry, Senator. On the amendment, closing on the amendment? All right. Is there any objection to the amendment? If not, the amendment passes. You may close on the bill.
Yeah, I'll set it aside. So as I was saying on this, there are no guarantees. Like, this is solving the particular math generation problem in front of us, but there's no guarantee that we won't have other problems in the future that may lead us to other emergencies. Sometimes the phrase is apt that the only guarantees are life, are death, and taxes. So I share the concern of both the speaker and all the people that brought up problems with the way we're going about this. And everyone is absolutely right. This feels unfair not just to the people, but to us. And we never should have been put in this position. But the past is prologue. We are here to deal with the emergency before us, and we can argue and quibble about what we should have done in the past and how things should have been done properly the first time around. And yeah, we could definitely address those things, but we have to focus on the plight before us now. We have to answer the question, has GPA exhausted all of their remedies before we grant them this very, very exceptional waiver? I requested this emergency session, but this request did not come from me. This is from GPA. I know there are some complaints that it feels like we are in emergency session all the time. But that's not for us to decide, that's for the times. The Speaker didn't ask for all these emergencies. I didn't ask for a typhoon. GPA didn't ask to be having to work around the legal system that is just fundamentally broken. But I don't think the answer is we don't have the emergency sessions. When GPA asked, when we asked GPA if they exhausted all their options, I believe them. I believe them, and so I asked my colleagues to support me in supporting GPA, help keep the lights on for all of us. You know, and as somebody who's been very critical of GPA, this doesn't mean we don't get to hold them accountable. If we find in the assessment and all this, because I've been trained as an emergency worker, and we were always trained to handle the emergency first and then have an after action review and see what was planned, what was done, what was necessary. Did we even have to have this emergency? And when we do the assessment after all is said and done, and we find that GPA led us astray and led us wrong, my colleagues, I will be with you every step of the way to help nail these people to the cross if they have doing us wrong. I will be every step in the way to help disband the CCU if they are doing us wrong here. So, I am willing to grant these extraordinary powers to GPA in the spirit of cooperation and trust that they are not leading us astray. So while we are helping GPA and CCU, we are also watching. So at this time, Madam Speaker, I would like to set aside this bill while we discuss other legislative matters, and then we can come back to this during motions and potentially add it to the third reading then.
All right, on that motion to temporarily set aside and come back to this bill after discussion, further discussions on other matters. Is there any objection? Seeing no objection, that motion carries.
Madam Speaker, at this time, I'd like to recess until 2 o'clock so we all have time to reflect and pray on this matter.
All right, before we do that, I would like to just announce, so if you check messages and comms, some of the proposals are in there. Some of them are been introduced as bills, and there is an additional letter from the Governor's Council that I will also send by email to you that you can review. All right, so, and I think the Attorney General's office is also here, and you may discuss with them, of course, any proposals that they are coming up with. They have additional ones. All right, with that, Senator Parkinson, sorry, Senator Fisher, did you have a motion?
Ma'am, no motion, but a point of inquiry to the Speaker. By what rule, you've noticed us for an emergency session to come in and speak about my friend's bill on the Power Authority. The session then is quite limited in the scope. I think Standing Rule 1.02 is, I think it's 1.02B. Maybe our legal counsel can look at it. Truncates this body's ability in an emergency session to listen to matters to only what was appended to the notice, which was my friend's bill on the emergency procurement. And ma'am, that's at Standing Rule 1.02.
Yes. As you know, in my, just one minute, I'm going to find my letter.
It's for the enlightenment of the body, it's Rule 1.02B sub 1 sub 2.
I don't have a copy in front of me, and neither does the clerk, but in my call to session, Senator Fisher, we did announce that the session would also accommodate the emergency that has been caused
Yes.
by the Attorney General's actions. And you're correct, there was no bill attached because there was no bill introduced at that point, but we have, I'm going to allow a motion, notwithstanding the rules, after we come back to see if any of these bills will be put into this session.
Okay, but just on that one, in order to amend or suspend the rules, you need 8 votes.
Yes, of course.
Yeah, and
Thank you, Senator Fisher.
you're very welcome, ma'am. And it's in the imperative, it shall be appended. A reference to another document which is not appended.
That's correct, Senator Fisher, and as I
is it
explained in my letter, there were no
insufficient under the
bills
rules,
introduced at that time, and so we will address any motions that are made, and we will require the requisite number of votes, just as we did to put this bill onto the agenda as well.
Ma'am, I just submit that would be in violation of the standing rules. Thank
Well,
you.
I disagree, and I think that that's misleading the public as well, Senator
Well,
Fisher.
no,
Thank you.
it's not
Thank you.
misleading the
You've been
public,
overruled,
Speaker.
Senator Fisher.
Ma'am,
On the
you're out of
motion
order.
to recess, we are recessed until 2 p.m.